Jai Hind everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel which is Explore Yourselves, Banking and General Knowledge etc. Jai Hind. Historical events of 25th April. Journey through time of 25th April 2025 Friday. Today is that is 25th April highlight in history. 1607. 80 years war. The Dutch fleet destroys the anchored Spanish fleet at Gibraltar. 1644. Transition from Ming to Qing. The Chongozhen Emperor, the last emperor of Ming China, commits suicide during a peasant rebellion led by Li Zicheng. 1707. A coalition of Britain, the Netherlands, and Portugal is defeated by a Franco-Spanish army at Almansa, Spain, in the War of the Spanish Succession. 1792. Highwayman Nicolas J. Pelletier becomes the first person executed by guillotine. 1792. La Marseillaise, the French national anthem, is composed by Claude-Joseph Roget de Lisle. 1808. Dano-Swedish War of 1808 to 1809. The Battle of Trangen took place at Trangen in Flisa, Hedemarken's amount between Swedish and Norwegian troops. 1829. Charles Fremantle arrives in HMS Challenger off the coast of modern-day Western Australia prior to declaring the Swan River colony for the British Empire. 1846. Thornton Affair. Open conflict begins over the disputed border of Texas, triggering the Mexican-American War. 1849. The Governor-General of Canada, Lord Elgin, signs the Rebellion Losses Bill, outraging Montreal's English population and triggering the Montreal riots. 1859. British and French engineers break ground for the Suez Canal. 1862. American Civil War. Forces under U.S. Admiral David Farragut demand the surrender of the Confederate city of New Orleans, Louisiana. 1864. American Civil War. In the Battle of Marks Mills, a force of 8,000 Confederate soldiers attacks 1,800 Union soldiers and a large number of wagon teamsters, killing or wounding 1,500 Union combatants. 1882. French and Vietnamese troops clashed in Tonkin when Commandant Henry Rivere seized the citadel of Hanoi with a small force of marine infantry. 1892. Delhi bombing during the Era des Attentats 1892 to 1894. 1898. Spanish-American War. The United States Congress declares that a state of war between the US and Spain has existed since April 21, when an American naval blockade of the Spanish colony of Cuba began. 1901. New York becomes the first US state to require automobile license plates. 1915. World War One. The Battle of Gallipoli begins. The invasion of the Turkish Gallipoli Peninsula by British, French, Indian, Newfoundland, Australian, and New Zealand troops begins with landings at Anzac Cove and Cape Helles. 1916. Anzac Day is commemorated for the first time on the first anniversary of the landing at Anzac Cove. 1920. At the San Remo Conference, the principal allied powers of World War One adopted resolution to determine the allocation of Class A League of Nations mandates for administrations of the former Ottoman-ruled lands of the Middle East. 1933. Nazi Germany issues the law against overcrowding in schools and universities, limiting the number of Jewish students able to attend public schools and universities. 1938. U.S. Supreme Court delivers its opinion in Erie Railroad Company versus Tompkins, and overturns a century of federal common law. 1944, the United Negro College Fund is incorporated. 1945, World War II, United States and Soviet reconnaissance troops meet in Torgau and Strela along the river Elbe, cutting the Wehrmacht of Nazi Germany in two. This would be later known as Elbe Day. 1945, World War II, Liberation Day, Italy. The National Liberation Committee for Northern Italy calls for a general uprising against the German occupation and the Italian Social Republic. 1945, United Nations Conference on International Organization. Founding negotiations for the United Nations begin in San Francisco. 1945, World War II. The last German troops retreat from Finnish soil in Lapland, ending the Lapland War. Military actions of the Second World War end in Finland. 1951, Korean War. Assaulting Chinese forces are forced to withdraw after heavy fighting with UN forces primarily made up of Australian and Canadian troops at the Battle of Kapiong. 1953, Francis Crick and James Watson published Molecular Structure of Nucleic Acids, a structure for deoxyribose nucleic acid, describing the double helix structure of DNA. 1954, the first practical solar cell is publicly demonstrated by Bell Telephone Laboratories. 1959, the St. Lawrence Seaway, linking the North American Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean, officially opens to shipping. 1960, the United States Navy submarine USS Triton completes the first submerged circumnavigation of the globe. 1961, Robert Noyce is granted a patent for an integrated circuit. 1972, Vietnam War, Ngo Huy Offensive, the North Vietnamese 320th Division forces 5,000 South Vietnamese troops to retreat and traps about 2,500 others northwest of Pontam. 1974, Carnation Revolution, a leftist military coup in Portugal, overthrows the authoritarian conservative Estado Novo regime. 1980, 146 people are killed when Dan Air Flight 1008 crashes near Los Rodes Airport in Tenerife, Canary Islands. 1981, more than 100 workers are exposed to radiation during repairs at the Tsuruga nuclear power plant in Japan. 1982, Israel completes its withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula per the Camp David Accords. 1983, Cold War. American schoolgirl Samantha Smith is invited to visit the Soviet Union by its leader Yuri Andropov after he read her letter in which she expressed fears about nuclear war. 1983, Pioneer 10 travels beyond Pluto's orbit. 1990, Violeta Chamorro takes office as the President of Nicaragua, the first woman to hold the position. 2001, President George W. Bush pledges US military support in the event of a Chinese attack on Taiwan. 2004, the March for Women's Lives brings over 1 million protesters, mostly pro-choice, to Washington, D.C. to protest the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act of 2003 and other restrictions on abortion. 2005, the final piece of the obelisk of Axum is returned to Ethiopia after being stolen by the invading Italian army in 1937. 2005, a seven-car commuter train derails and crashes into an apartment building near Yamagasaki Station in Japan, killing 107, including the driver. 2005, Bulgaria and Romania signed the Treaty of Accession 2005 to join the European Union. 2007, Boris Yeltsin's funeral, the first to be sanctioned by the Russian Orthodox Church for a head of state since the funeral of Emperor Alexander III in 1894. 2014, the Flint water crisis begins when officials at Flint, Michigan switched the city's water supply to the Flint River, leading to lead and bacteria contamination. 2015, at least 8,962 are killed in Nepal after a massive 7.8 magnitude earthquake strikes Nepal. Thank you very much for your patience. Request for like, share and subscribe.